Welcome to Discovering. Tonight we talk to the Michigan DNR about a couple of topics. First, the new Great Lakes fishing decree, and wolves, including the new camera study that the Michigan DNR is doing.
If and when they are delisted, what would it actually take to have a harvest season?
So sit back and relax. It's Monday night and it's time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill, the eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Our Great Lakes are an important fishery for both recreational anglers and tribal commercial fishers. Since 1985, the state of Michigan, the federal government, and the 5 tribal governments have co-managed the Great Lakes that fall within Michigan waters through a negotiated set of rules called the Great Lakes Consent Decree. I sat down with the DNR to talk about what the decree is and changes made in the new 2023 decree that was signed this fall. I am joined by Dave Caroffino of the Michigan DNR Fisheries Division Tribal Unit, and we're here to talk about the Great Lakes Consent Decree that was recently, I guess you would say it's been updated, and it's been very recently signed by the U.S. federal judge. I guess first, yes, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do for the Michigan DNR.
Sure. So I manage the Tribal Coordination Unit. Our unit is a specialized unit within Fisheries Division that has the responsibility for implementing both formal and informal agreements that we have with tribal governments throughout the state.
So the decree, let's go back into the history. How and why has this ever come about, and what is the decree?
Sure. So back in 1979 was the first U.S. District Court decision that related to tribal fishing in the Great Lakes. Judge Roell at that time reaffirmed the tribal right to fish. The tribes retained the right to fish in the Great Lakes in the 1836 treaty territory when they signed that treaty. And ultimately in 1985 was the first, what was called a decree at the time, where Judge Enslin had adopted one of the agreements that parties had made, and that was really what started sort of the rules by which the state, the tribes, and the federal government would co-manage the Great Lakes. That agreement was in place until the year 2000, and the parties at that time in 1998, 1999 came together to renegotiate a new set of rules, and that was 5 tribal governments, the U.S. federal government, and the state of Michigan. They all agreed to the 2000 consent decree. That was in place through 2020. Judge Maloney extended that numerous times because the parties needed more time to negotiate. We had a pandemic thrown in there, which kind of threw us for a loop as well. And we've seen some dramatic changes in the Great Lakes, which led to some very challenging negotiations. But ultimately, we had a proposed decree sent to Judge Maloney in December of 22. All parties agreed to that except for the Sioux tribe. So we had 6 out of 7 parties in agreement. Till ultimately, he signed what was the proposed decree into effect as the new decree. And so on August 24th, he signed into effect what he termed the 2023 Great Lakes Fishing Decree. We probably will refer to it as the 2023 decree for short, because that's not as much of a mouthful.
Right. So what are the rules, and kind of in a nutshell, what are the rules and regulations that are within the decree?
So the decree has many different aspects to it. Obviously, it's very long, very detailed, but it outlines allocation of different fish species and what proportion of this species, for example, lake trout, what proportion will the tribes get and what proportion will the state recreational fishers get in different parts of the Great Lakes. It does the same thing for whitefish. What proportion of the whitefish will the tribal commercial fishery get and what proportion will the state commercial fishery get? It also outlines how harvest limits will be set for both of those two species. Those are the two most important species that focus on really the intersection of the two fisheries. The tribes primarily prefer to harvest whitefish, but they also harvest lake trout. The state recreational fishery in many places of the Great Lakes prefers to harvest salmon, but also harvests lake trout, of course, as kind of a secondary species. And then the state commercial fishery harvests whitefish where it still exists. So those are the main species, and the decree outlines how we calculate harvest limits and how we divide those harvest limits up. There's other provisions within the decree for other species. There's provisions for how we share data amongst the parties. There's provisions for law enforcement and how we can make sure that we follow the rules we have within the consent decree, and numerous other smaller things as well.
The Great Lakes Decree is statewide, but for this show, Dave and I kept our conversation geared toward the waters in the UP.
So yeah, what are some differences from the 2000 to 2023 regarding Lake Superior?
So the biggest difference is there's going to be a little bit of a change in some of the areas that different gear can be used compared to the 2000 consent decree. So in the 2000 consent decree, areas west of Grand Island, just west of Munising, were open to trap net fishing only for tribal fishers. In the 2023 decree, the area west of Grand Island, west to the boundary of treaty waters, the Chocolate River, that area will be open to gill net usage by tribal commercial fishermen. There's a couple other things that have changed in Lake Superior as well. Munising Bay used to be open to tribal commercial fishers with gill nets. That is now going to be a closed commercial fishing zone. So Munising Bay was open, will now be closed. Also, the two offshore sites, Big Reef and Standard Rock, they're offshore reefs. They're kind of destination lake trout fisheries for recreational fishers. Those are now both going to be closed to commercial fishing. So those are kind of two unique areas that are reserved for recreational fishing per se. So in Lake Michigan, there's going to be some changes in the Bay to Knock area, both in Little Bay and in Big Bay. So first in Big Bay, on the commercial side of things, there's been a commercial gill net fishery in Big Bay to Knock since 2017. It's been small. It's been kind of research oriented. That was something that was conducted by the Little Traverse Bay bands of Odawa Indians. They are now going to be able to license gill net fishers in Big Bay to Knock to fish up to 12,000 feet of gill net. And the Sioux tribe will have the same opportunity to license gill net fishers to fish up to 12,000 feet of net in Big Bay to Knock. So in Big Bay to Knock, though, there are depth restrictions for those gill nets, and the intent is to avoid any catch of walleye. So the depth restrictions are to allow tribal fishers to fish with their preferred gear type and to pursue their preferred species, which is whitefish. So the depth restrictions that are in place essentially means that there won't be any open water in the northern half of Big Bay to Knock. Most of the areas where those fishers will be pursuing whitefish will be further out into the northern parts of Green Bay. And then in Little Bay to Knock, it was closed to commercial fishing in the 2000 consent decree. It is still closed to commercial fishing in the 2023 decree, but there are some changes to the subsistence fishing regulations in Little Bay. So in Little Bay in the spring is a popular subsistence fishery for walleye. Tribal members pursue walleye. Okay. That is now going to be quite a bit more restrictive than it was in the 2000 consent decree. Previously, fishers could use 300 feet of gill net per day. That's decreased to 100 feet of gill net per day. Previously, the limit was 100 pounds of fish per day. Now the limit is 20 fish per day. It's a little easier to count fish than it is to know how much weight you have in your possession. There's also enhanced reporting requirements. So the state and the tribes and the federal government will have a much better understanding of what the take is during that spring subsistence fishery compared to what we had in the 2000 consent decree.
There are harvest limits for whitefish, for lake trout, and then any walleye or salmon or bycatch.
Yep, just those two. Lake trout and whitefish are the only two that have specific harvest limits.
Okay.
Yep, so the whitefish harvest limits, the allocations are pretty much the same. The only difference is the state was allocated 10% of the quota in Big Beta Knock as part of the 2000 consent decree. The state no longer has an allocation for whitefish in Big Beta Knock, so that area is going to be exclusively a tribal commercial fishery now. And with regard to lake trout, the allocations are pretty much the same. There's a couple of changes in northern Lake Huron. And the other area where there's some changes is in the western part of Lake Superior with regard to treaty waters anyway, western Lake Superior, so just east of Marquette. That area, the state previously had 95% of the allocation for lake trout. Now that's going to be 60% for the state. So the tribes will have an increased harvest limit in that area because of the gear usage change. So they'll be allowed to fish with gill nets in that area now, and so they'll have a higher allocation for lake trout because they'll be having a bit more fishing activity for them just east of Marquette in that range.
So is that why, since the whitefish, has populations are not doing great in Michigan, Huron, is that why lake trout is now being, I guess, more pursued as commercial?
Yep,
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. So in the 2000 consent decree, lake trout was not a primary species. I mean, at that time, lake trout were 30 cents a pound on the commercial market, and whitefish were $1.50 up to $2 a pound. I mean, it wasn't worth your time to try to pursue lake trout because economically whitefish were so much more valuable, and they remain much more valuable today. But with the disappearance of whitefish, then what's next, right? And the value of lake trout has increased on the commercial markets because of that. So that is a difference from 2000 to 2023 is lake trout are now pursued as a commercial species in many places, which is really not a whole lot different in terms of, well, if a fish is harvested as bycatch when you're targeting whitefish, or if it's pursued commercially as the target species, it's still capped by a harvest limit. And there's still a safe number of lake trout that can be taken on an annual basis from each management unit. And now we'll get better data. So we'll have a better understanding of how is the fishery progressing towards that harvest limit throughout the course of the year. And that's the benefit of electronic reporting more frequently. This one is in effect for 24 years. In this decree, some of the harvest limit cycles and some of the review periods for different things are on multiples of 3 or 6. And so that's why we ended up with 24 years.
Dave and I discussed it for over an hour. So to listen to the full interview, head over to my website, discovertheup.com. With archery deer season in full swing and bird hunters out walking 2 tracks and forest roads, hunters are spotting more than grouse and whitetails. They're seeing game cameras like these everywhere. Attached to the cameras are little note cards that say what they are, phone numbers for who to call with questions, and why they're there. But for more clarification about this new wolf study, I talked to DNR wildlife biologist Brian Roell at the latest NRC meeting.
We're looking at another way of estimating wolves using trail cameras. We're up a little over 1,200 cameras now. We're actually going to probably be pushing closer to 1,300 when we're actually complete.
The method the DNR currently uses is a track survey done in the winter.
What we're finding is that the method that we currently use, I've spoke to you about it, is that the one detractor is we're counting a midwinter when they're at their lowest point, so we always call it our minimum winter count. Obviously, if you're doing a track survey, you need snow. It's just an artifact. It's always going to be the minimum.
The cameras will be up year-round, so the DNR can estimate populations during other times of the year.
Whether it be summer or winter, and we'll be able to give a range. But it also has applications for other species. So those cameras that you see out there, they're actually rather visible because we're shooting down roads. Because wolves use roads. So other species that use roads like deer, moose, turkeys, bobcats, even foxes, we could use the same camera system to look at all those species as well, which will be a lot of those animals we just don't have a good indicator or index on. It's really going to be a boon for wildlife and a way for us to estimate a lot of different wildlife. Obviously, wolves is our main goal, to develop a system that we could use, but if this works, it has a lot of benefits for a lot of wildlife species.
Earlier this year, the DNR conducted a pilot survey with cameras to see if the project was feasible. They placed 200 cameras in the central UP. In 3 months, the cameras captured 1.7 million images. 4,221 of those photos were of wolves. Some people are worried that the DNR is using the cameras to watch human activity in these areas, but Brian says that's not the case.
So we're asking folks just to leave them be. I know some folks think that we're trying to intrude or count people or cars on the road and are saying, well, why is a camera on the road? But these wildlife species use the road, particularly wolves. That's just their travel quarters. They pick the easiest way through their environment. So that's why they're on the road. And the reason they're down the road is that we're trying to capture all the members of the pack. If you have perpendicular to a road, yeah, you'll get everybody runs trail cameras that they're blind. Well, you get a deer butt, and then you get another deer, and then, or are they the same? Can you hook them together? So that's why our cameras are pointed down the road, usually in a north facing fashion to avoid sunlight issues. And they're up higher because they're going to be out year round, so we don't want snow blocking them, or even if the road ends up getting plowed, we don't want it covered by a snowbank. So we're not out there collecting license plate numbers or people's faces. In fact, humans aren't even going to be looking at those pictures. We have a artificial intelligence program that processes millions of pictures because we're going to have millions of them. And so people's faces are blurred out, vehicles are blurred out. We don't even look at those.
Photos will be analyzed in 2024 and 25 with wolf estimates and results available to the public.
Basically a 3-year project to look at the feasibility and the results. We're also going to be doing our normal winter track survey for wolves, so we have a direct comparison, because we'll actually be able to compare data, which is always the best way to do it, to see what kind of accuracy rates are we getting. It's not like we're looking for anything more accurate. We know what we do. Estimates are very accurate minimum population, but that's what it is, a minimum population.
As I mentioned earlier, I attended the Natural Resources Commission monthly meeting that was held this month in Escanaba. The NRC holds its meeting only once a year in the UP. Many wildlife and fisheries topics were presented, plus some life-saving awards, and of course, the topic that most members of the public came to listen and comment on is our wolf population.
We have to find something to do to resolve the problem with the wolves.
In April, the Straits Area Sportsman's Club created a UP Wolves Only Facebook page. One of our objectives was to collect current pictures of wolves in the UP, and it didn't take long to come up with more than 631.
The UP Wolves Only page should come with a warning. Content might contain gossip, rumors, exaggerations, and opinions.
Follow any Outdoors Facebook page in the UP or the comments on any news magazine's social media post regarding wolves, whitetails, or the Michigan DNR. Wolves are a hotter topic than Taylor Swift at a football game.
The UP used to be the premier area at the deer hunt, okay? Is it now? I don't think so. I don't think so. Can we do something about it? Yes. First thing we can do is admit the problem that we have, that all the sportsmen's groups are telling. The wolves are, we can't keep saying the wolf is, we had between 600 and 700 wolves and they're doing just fine. They're not. They're out of control.
They say let nature be nature, let nature control the population. Plus, wolves in Iron County are our first and best defense, limiting CWD infiltrating from Wisconsin.
So MUCC fully supports hunting and trapping of wolves here in Michigan and across the Upper Peninsula for utilitarian and management purposes.
We have known for many years now that there is a very solid wolf population, even by minimum counts.
Brian Roell laid out 14 steps that would need to be taken to create a wolf hunt in the event the wolf is federally delisted.
So we have a new public attitude survey that we just completed in 2022. So 5 years down the road, if wolves are just now being delisted, we're probably going to have to do another public attitude survey. These are steps that would occur after delisting if we were given the charge to look at what it would take to get a season. We can't make a predetermined decision. The other big thing is we don't know when they're going to get delisted. So you don't want to go through a whole bunch of steps and then 5 years later, now they're delisted. Well, you got to do that all over again.
The time frame for going through what was just talked about is too long. when the opportunity comes and the wolves are delisted, we should be able to start something. We should be able to start something immediately.
And the wolf debate will continue into the unforeseeable future. For the last 30 seconds of the show, I want to share a video that I saw posted online. On the morning of October 16th in eastern Chippewa County, Chuck Peacock was in his blind bow hunting. And he wasn't the only one out hunting that morning. A bobcat appeared and tried to snag a turkey for breakfast. Sadly for the bobcat, though, it was a swing and a miss. Thanks, Chuck, for sending me this video to share. That's all for tonight, and I hope to see you right back here next week for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.